Welcome this morning. I've got the pleasure to introduce Dr. Vrezec for our keynote speaker this morning. I'm quite excited. Al has been doing some tremendous work, not only on birds, beetles, and so forth in Slovenia and in the Baltic regions. And so I'm anxious to hear about his collective efforts in that regards. Let's go, Al, please.
Thank you very much, David, for a nice introduction. And first I would like to thank you and to Rui and to Ines and to other organizers of this conference to give me the opportunity to show my research path on owls in a bit longer time slot. I titled the presentation "Being with Owls" from faunistic service, where we all usually start with some faunistic service then to approach more complex things as ecosystems, so how the owls act in the ecosystems. So my main research species is the Ural owl that will be in behind, but not just this one. You will see also other owls are coming into this story. Okay, first some background. I started my research work in Slovenia, which is quite small European country, but quite rich with owls. We have 9 owl species regularly breeding, 1 irregular breeder, and 2 vagrants. So almost all owls except the hawk owl was observed in Slovenia. So it was quite a nice place to work. And when we start with the research, we have to look back what was already known and so on. And owl research already started in Slovenia in 18th century with Skopoli, and from this region he described now at least 2 new species for the science at that time. That's what barn owl and little owl, and also some additional species I would say not yet recognized as a priority of Skopoli. Strix sylvestris, I will not name the species now officially in Strix rufa, which may be not so relevant in barn owls subspecies as we have learned yesterday. Well, Skopoli was very collaborative also with the other scientists around Europe at that time, and already he done quite strong connection between south and north, and he collaborated quite much with famous Linnaeus from Sweden, and they exchanged quite many letters that are still preserved. That is one letter from 1763 when they discussed about the Skops owl, which was unknown to Linnaeus, but very well known to Skopoli. Of course, they named it a bit differently. And this connection, this collaboration, which is quite important, especially now south and north, is actually still alive and is quite important. Just one case in Ural owls, and which is very important also for the south to get some new knowledge, not to start from zero, and some also this collaboration implemented in a more wide European scheme like Europemon is the project of European Science Foundation, which I will present in the next talk. So what was the trend of owl research in Slovenia? Here just to figure out this, I use the data from the Slovenian Bird Ringing Center, which is operating from beginning of the century, so 1927. The first birds were ringed. This is now 90 years. And I looked how many owls were ringed, and you see that it's increasing trend, so we can say that also the research is increasing, with the most ringed owls being the tawny owl, long-eared owl, and Scops owl so far. So also with new techniques of survey, also the knowledge about the distribution has increased largely. This is the known distribution of the Ural owl in Slovenia at the beginning of 20th century. Then later, approximately 50 years, there was almost no studies. There was a new picture done by the first ornithological atlas of breeding birds. And you see that here in this part of Slovenia, Ural owls are completely missing. And then with the new survey methods, the knowledge increased very much in the 90s. But still there was a gap. So also here the surveys were done, but the Ural owls were not found. But now, quite recently, new surveys were done. There were some hints that perhaps some Ural owls are as well here. So we conducted the modeling approach with the machine learning, and this is the potential habitat suitability of the Ural owl in Slovenia. This more bluish or greenish patch are the best, so here in this part, but there are also some here which we checked later, and we were quite surprised that we found quite many of them on the sites where it was not known previously. So this shows that on one way that it's most probably that the species is in expansion. So, but these are mainly, I would say, faunistic data, but we also done some more monitoring, more detailed studies using two techniques, that's playback survey and nest box inspection. And with playback survey, we actually monitor the territories. So not really the breeding population, but let's say potential breeding population, because not all pairs are not breeding in all years. And with the nest box, so with the nests where we actually can estimate the trends of actual breeding. And what were the results? These are from 3 species that I'm working on. So the Ural owl shows in this period increase, about that's even significant increase, quite large. And this increase is evident also for the tawny owl. So they are both increasing, while the boreal owl has negative trend, which is not significant, but still in 2017, so this year, we have very good mouse year, so it was really increased the population of the boreal owl. We don't know actually why and how, but apparently the species is probably not doing very well. That was the territories, but now the nests. Here we have a little bit shorter time period, but still the Ural owl is increasing, as well as tawny owl, but the trends are not significant. While we don't have such data for the boreal owl, since we have the nest boxes for the boreal owl, but they seem to be quite reluctant to take them. In our environment, there are simply too much suitable natural tree holes, especially in beach, because also the black woodpecker is quite common. So for large trix owls, we use this kind of the nest box, and this actually occupied by both the Ural owl, the tawny owl, and occasionally even with the Tengmans owl or the boreal owl. And this design enables us to study also some interactions between, some competition between these species. And here's one case of one nest box. You see there's the same, and this was recorded in the same autumn last year. So you see this is the tawny owl, and this is the Ural owl, in the same nest box. This was the dates recorded in the slope of a few weeks. So they are both visiting the same nest boxes, so the interaction could be quite strong. So the outcome of this nest box, then the breeding season was very interesting tawny owl. So it bred successfully. But we have another case also from this year. In one nest box I found this. Pertte already showed something similar, and I think that also some similar things also other people have found. So this is it was the Ural owl nest, and this is the Ural owl chick, and this is the tawny owl chick. So it seems that the Ural owl expelled the tawny owl from there. Unfortunately, we don't know what then happened with this chick, if they were raised up or not. But that would be interesting if it is. My experience with these two chicks were that chicks of Ural owls are usually very aggressive, so very strong. Unlike the tawny owls, which are very calm, but this chick was very aggressive as well. So it used some habits of the Ural owl. So apparently there is quite strong competition between these two Strix species, and we investigated the habitat segregation between these two, and in the sympatry where they live together, they are quite well segregated. So there's a narrow part of overlap, of course, but the tawny owl is driven mainly to the sites on the lowlands and near the settlements by the Ural owl. But then we checked also at the sites where the Ural owl was absent, and you see that tawny owl, allopatric tawny owl, can expand their range also where the Ural owl would live if it would be there. So it seems that there are quite strong interactions between these two species, and is asymmetric. So the larger Ural owl is dominant over smaller tawny owl. And what are the mechanisms? So is this intragult predation, which is also known, or maybe more mild way of interaction, so interspecific territoriality, if the Ural owls are territorial against the tawny owls? We checked this with playback experiments, so we have done some experiments as well, and this was our study and the procedure, maybe not so important now. And we used the male territorial calls at all territories of tawny and Ural owl, using Ural owl male call, tawny owl male call, and then as well the boreal owl male call as other small sympatric species, and as a control we use the great gray owl call. So it is the species that is unknown to these owls, and we can regard this, that response to great gray owl would be some misresponse. So something that it's not really territorial. They respond to something unusual only. So with this we checked whether the species really recognize themselves with their territorial. So first, a little bit about interspecific territorial patterns of both species. We followed many parameters, and we see that the response rate is much higher in the tawny owl than in Ural owl. Then there are some insignificant parameters, but the nearest position was again significant, and the tawny owl usually responded much closer to the playback than where the playback was than Ural owl. And the other was response time. So tawny owl responded faster than the Ural owls. And also the call type, the tawny owl almost exclusively responded with a territorial call, male call, but less in the Ural owl, which responded also with this other call type. So this is one of the excitement call of the male, for example, not necessarily just this territorial song. So what was now the result of the interspecific territoriality? We do it in two steps. The first step is to compare our response parameters between response to conspecific and to great gray owl as a control. And we have quite several parameters, but in Ural owl it seems that only a response rate is significantly different. So the Ural owl responded to its own, so conspecific playback much more intensively than to this response. So they, in a way, they recognize that great gray owl is probably not something very interesting. So what was now the difference between two sympatric species? Actually, they responded quite similarly also to the tawny owl and to the boral owl. A little bit less on boral owl, but still the differences were not significant. In conclusion, that could be that Ural owl could behave, could perform some territorial patterns against both sympatric species. What about the tawny owl? There were more parameters significantly different when compared conspecific and great gray owl call. So the first, the response rate, they responded much less to the great gray owl. What about the two sympatric? They responded also much less. So they don't, especially against the Ural owl, they don't behave territorial. The first position, so to the great gray owl, they responded to a much larger distance than to the conspecific. But what about two sympatric species? So in Ural owl, again, quite far away. But in Tengman's owl, the boral owl, they responded much closer, indicating some level of interspecific territoriality also against the boral owl. And what about the nearest position of response? Again, very different from the response to great owl, but in two sympatric species, it was the quite similar pattern that indicate the interspecific territoriality, again against smaller boral owl, but not against the Ural owl. So in sum, what kind of interactions we can expect between these three sympatric species. It seems that there's very strong interaction, especially as interspecific territoriality of Ural owl against the tawny owl, but much less of tawny owl against the Ural owl. And I'm sorry, here's something should be red, because both species also perform some territoriality against the Tengbams, so the boreal owl. And what this could be, could be intensity of interguild interactions or something else. So we check this pattern that is actually quite, the interactions, the intensity of interaction between species is quite different. So stronger between Ural and tawny owl, but less against the boreal owl. So we check the habitat segregation patterns also in the whole owl guild. And as I showed previously, there is strong segregation between Ural owl and tawny owl, but when we add the boreal owl, it seems that it's strongly segregated from the tawny owl, but not so much against the Ural owl. So we have to have in mind that we are in the area where the tawny owl is really dominant species. So boreal owl could use some kind of refugee on the Ural owl territories against the tawny owl. We tested this also with this model showing the response of boreal owl density against the density of tawny and Ural owl, and you see higher density of tawny owl means lower probability of boreal owl occurrence, but with Ural owl the probability of occurrence is increasing, especially because of this refugee effect. So this interspecific territoriality, so the heterospecific response of owls could indicate also some more general rules. We here calculate very simple index between heterospecific, the level of heterospecific response versus interspecific response, and we have found the following results in all three species, that the lowest is in the smallest species. The larger is the species, the higher is the heterospecific response. We can connect this with this rule of ecological dominance, so the dominant species are also larger, more powerful, and we can ask if there is any rule of asymmetric heterospecific response in general. Unfortunately, there is not many published data on heterospecific response of owls, but still there are some, especially from North America. And I made just preliminary preliminary test, and it seems that it's really the larger species, so that's the weight differences. So the largest weight the difference between the two species, more heterospecific response you can expect. But as I said, still some more data are needed to really confirm this hypothesis. So it is in practice, smaller owl don't perform heterospecific response, probably because of greater risk of interguild predation. So the predation in owls the patterns was quite well studied, especially in relation to the prey species. But I will not do it now. It's quite intensely studied, especially in the north. But I would like to show you some interesting ideas what about if you have the natural experiment, I would say, what about if you have the same predator in the different regions and habitats? So this is the Ural owl again that inhabits quite different sites. So this is the temperate forest on the south and boreal forest on the north. So we can play with this if we move this predator to different environments, how it behaves. So the Ural owl is predominantly boreal species with some southern isolates, and one is of course also in central and southern Europe, described as a subspecies Macrura. Here are two museum specimens of the males. This is Litorata from Finland, and this is Macrura from Slovenia, and there are quite marked differences. So you can also see here the Macrura is bigger, darker, and longer tailed. So there are some major differences, but interestingly, we have done some genetic studies. There seems to be no genetic differences between two subspecies, so it's still open how these differences are generated. But anyway, now I'm more focused on ecological. So on the Ural owl, this Macrura species, we have very big morphological variability, which is not so evident on the north. And it was recognized already in 18th century by Hake. He described this Strix nigra, which is actually melanistic Ural owl. And we have found that at least 3 morphotypes occur on the south. This is the pale one, I would say the Nordic version, and then the gray one, the partly melanistic and completely melanistic birds. And what is the frequency? The most common are gray specimens, but melanistic, if we combine those, are about more than 10% of population occurring regularly. So that's not a rare case. These are some pictures, partly melanistic and complete melanistic chick. So quite interesting, I would say, field of the research still. But I'm going now back to the diet analysis study where we checked with also with Perti, Seppo Sulkava and Andris Avotins from Latvia. So we checked the breeding diet from the nest boxes from the 3 sites, from boreal, hemiboreal, and temperate region. So for the start, we should check what is actually, of course, I would say the predators are responding to availability of the prey in the environment. So what is actually the prey availability? That was done with the traps. So we see that in boreal and hemiboreal region, there is the dominant position of the voles. So the voles are really the most common, the most abundant in the assemblage. But on the south, this role is taken by mice. So the mice are dominating. On the north, also there is higher percentage of shrews, is marked with red. And on the south, we have also dormice, which are probably a little bit underestimated here because these are the traps on the ground, and dormice are mainly arboreal species. So we have here 2 kinds of habitats, vole dominating and mouse dominating. And how the owl then respond to this? This is the diet analysis. So it seems, you see this these parts are vowels, and it seems that they are dominant in all. Here the mouths are of course larger proportion, but still vowels are dominant. So vowels seem to be important prey of the Ural owl, even in the area subdominated by vowels. So there's the question if the Ural owl will evolve specialized predator. So depending in large way on the vowels, even when the vowels are more scarce. We questioned in this pan-European study also about the effect of the diet on the brood size, and we have found that it is in the large brood size there is a high proportion of vowels, but also mice, especially on the south, and especially very important of large prey. So very successful females with a large brood have a lot of large prey. On the north these are water voles, and on the south these are fat dormice. So they are very important for production of the young. Of course, owls are top predators in the ecosystem, and there is very famous paper by Sergio and colleagues published in Nature, Top Predators and Biodiversity, where they used also owls as an example of top predators, and they have found higher diversity on the sites where these top predators, including owls, are. But we have to ask if all owls behave or have the same role. So if they are really all such indicators, or they can be different. Here have again these two owl species, and we have checked on their territories the abundance of different groups in the biodiversity. Of course, the small mammals are very important as the main prey, and it seems there is no big differences. This is the Ural owl territory, this is the Tony owl territory, this is just the control on the sites where no owls were occurring, and it seems that the small mammal diversity is equal between these two the territories, these two species. But what about others? These are birds, so songbirds, and this is not equal. So in Tony owls, the diversity is higher than in the Ural owl territories. And then further, we have found for the carbid, the ground beetles, which have much higher diversity at the Ural owl territories. So here, if I now focus only the beetles, because they are interesting, because Ural owl mostly does not prey beetles. And that's quite interesting that the beetles has high diversity as Ural owl territories. So because I'm conducting also the monitoring of other species in the ecosystem, here I have Ural owl, so and Apodemus, the wood mouse, and one carbid beetle, quite abundant, Molops stereolatus, and here is the fluctuations of the population. These are the nests, and it seems like this. If we check the top years of mice, it's increasing in the owl, but quite opposite in the beetle. So the beetle fluctuate reverse from the mice and consequently of the owls. So if we check how this is significant, of course we know that there is significant connection between prey, so the mice and the owl, but that's of course positive, but it seems that mice has double roles, so control down up and up down. So top down on the beetles, that is high negative correlation, And consequently also the owl, the breeding of the owl has negative effect, but this is probably just the consequence of the mice. So we are thinking that we are on the beginning of the studies, and we are thinking if on the territories of the Ural owl, because of the higher predation pressure on mice, would be a kind of a refugee also on this non-prey species. So that owls has some impact on non-prey species, which is, I think, quite overlooked phenomena so far. So if we see the whole ecosystem, which is quite complicated, there is of course quite clear relationship between small mammals, mice and owls, and also there is interaction between the both all the small mammal species, and then is of course interaction between different predators, as these two species are, which are connected also with the prey. But then there we have some outliers in the biodiversity, so the ground beetle that can be affected by the small mammals, and at least indirectly by the top predators, so here the owls. So I think that the owls can open us the window to the ecosystem in general, to see these patterns underneath maybe more clearly. So I think it's quite important to use owl also in this much broader ecosystem point of view. Thank you very much for listening.
Regarding the response to the playbacks, I have the experience of Ural owls responding to eagle owls quite aggressively. Do you have eagle owls in your study area, and do you think it could be probably not only a size effect, but also some species are really more responsive independently of the size?
Yes, now we have eagle owls as well in my study area, although they are not so abundant. So, and they are mainly confined to the edge, so not really to the forest, but to the edge. So we didn't test this with the eagle owl, how this response is. But in general, yes, it could be that I agree that there could be some. Although maybe one case I didn't mention it. We did an experiment with the stuffed birds on the nest, near the nest site, and we play back the Ural owl by the tawny owl nest, and tawny owl did not respond, but attacked the bird without response. So this is the mobbing. So it is, if you are smaller, it's not wise to call too much. So it's better to do it with the surprise. So I think that's now depends how close we are in active nests and so on. I believe that around the active nest, the birds are even more aggressive. That I would say. But I think that can be without the pollen.
Okay, you was suggesting that Ural owl is whole specialist, but I would like to suggest that Ural owls and other owls take the prey that is easiest to catch, and in this case, wood mouse is much better, I think, in escaping predation by owls than, for example, bank vole or microtus voles. They have better eyesight, better hearing, and so on, and much faster also, so they are better in escaping, and maybe because of that they have been catched by